She didn't need to steal him. She just needed me to believe I didn't deserve him. Lauren was not the kind of woman who needed a room's attention. She was the one who curated the light so others could shine better in it. As a book editor, her superpower was subtlety. She lived among margins, adjusted pauses between words, and taught best-selling authors how to trust the silence between paragraphs. Her life was a quiet accumulation of other people's stories, and for the most part, she liked it that way. At 29, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Or so she thought. She lived in a warm, corner apartment lined with built-in shelves and walls that bore the scent of old paper and tea. Her fiancé, Isaac, was a soft-voiced architect who understood her quiet better than anyone ever had. He didn't mind that she spoke more through notes than speeches. He had once told her, during a rainy walk through the botanical gardens, "You don't need to speak louder, Lauren. The people who matter will listen closely." He had been her safe place. A man who wasn't rattled by her gentleness. Who traced her boundaries with reverence, not conquest. They had been together for 3 years. The wedding was scheduled for late May. Invitations printed. Dress fitted. Their future unfurled like a slow, certain symphony. Then came Marissa. Lauren's older sister was the kind of person who loved centerpieces that screamed for attention. She spoke in statements, not questions, and wore heels that clicked like punctuation. They had never been close. Not really. As children, Marissa had called Lauren gray, not for her wardrobe but her essence. "You're just so soft," she would say, sipping from a mug Lauren had washed. To Marissa, being noticed was a form of survival. To Lauren, being overlooked had been a shield. Marissa had recently returned from a 4-year stint as a creative director in San Francisco. Newly single, newly ambitious, and suddenly interested in spending more time with family. She arrived at Lauren and Isaac's apartment one evening with a bottle of wine and compliments that felt too rehearsed. She admired the ring, asked about the venue, hugged Isaac longer than she needed to. Lauren noticed, but didn't name it. She had never learned how to accuse someone without sounding insecure. And Marissa knew that. What happened next didn't feel like sabotage. Not at first. It felt like concern. Sisterly whispers. Hushed tones in kitchens. Texts sent late at night. Then one morning, Marissa invited Lauren out for coffee. Just the two of them. She wore a sympathetic face. Ordered their childhood favorite scones. And then said it. "I need to tell you something." Marissa began, resting her hand on Lauren's wrist. "I didn't want to. I really didn't, but I saw Isaac with someone." Lauren blinked. "What do you mean?" "I followed him. I know that's crazy, but something didn't feel right. I saw him with a woman. They were intimate." And then she produced it. A voice recording. Isaac's voice. Soft, laughing, followed by a woman's voice. Flirtatious, familiar. Lauren listened, heart sinking. The file was clipped, unclear, but enough to plant doubt. Enough to fracture a foundation. "I didn't want to ruin things," Marissa said, eyes glistening, "but I couldn't watch you walk into something broken." Lauren didn't sleep that night. She replayed the audio, tried to trace timelines. She asked Isaac about it the next morning. He was stunned, hurt. "That's not me," he insisted. "That's not what it sounds like." But he couldn't prove it. And Lauren, raised on a diet of self-doubt and deference, couldn't shake the voice in her head that sounded a lot like Marissa. "You're too quiet to be loved out loud." The engagement unraveled slowly. Lauren didn't confront. She withdrew. Isaac tried, letters, flowers, even showing up outside her office, but Marissa always intercepted. She claimed to be protecting Lauren, helping her move on, and somehow, their family believed her. Their parents said things like, "Marissa's just looking out for you," and, "Maybe Isaac wasn't the one after all." No one asked Lauren what she believed. They only told her what she should accept. She didn't argue. She packed her books, left her job, cancelled the lease, deleted her social media, and disappeared. No one chased after her. And Marissa stayed, moved into a bigger apartment, took a promotion, hosted family brunches, When asked about Lauren, she smiled and said, "She's off finding herself. Isn't that beautiful?" But Lauren wasn't lost. She was building something no one would ever see coming. And the story had only just begun. When no one believed me, I stopped explaining, and started writing. Lauren didn't leave overnight. It took 6 days. 6 days to terminate her lease, shut down her social accounts, and liquidate the life she had curated with such quiet care. She boxed up her wedding dress, not to burn it, not to donate it, but to bury it in a storage unit she wouldn't visit again. The ring, still too intimate to discard. She slipped into an old leather-bound journal and sealed it shut. Then she disappeared. The city she chose wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even memorable. That was the point. A coastal town with foggy mornings, anonymous bookstores, and no family ties. She rented a one-bedroom apartment above a bakery that opened too early and closed too late. The scent of cinnamon and espresso became her only constants. She found part-time work at an independent press, cataloging submissions and proofreading galley copies. No one knew who she was. No one cared. She liked it that way. Her voice, the one she'd never quite been allowed to use in her own home, started to speak again, only this time, through her fingers. Lauren started a blog, anonymous, no images, just a dark background and a serif font, the kind that looked like paper. She wrote about grief, not the loud, theatrical kind, but the kind that curled beneath your ribs. She wrote about what it felt like to be lied about by someone who shared your blood. About being loved quietly and discarded loudly. About vanishing, not out of shame, but self-preservation. Her posts gained traction, slowly at first. A comment here, a reblog there. Then came the emails, mostly from women, strangers who had also been silenced, disbelieved, erased. "You write what I couldn't say. It's like you're telling my story. Thank you for existing, even if I don't know who you are." Then came the offers. A self-help author in Seattle asked her to ghostwrite a memoir. Then a romance novelist from Toronto. A trauma-informed poet based in Oregon. Lauren, still anonymous, accepted the jobs with a pseudonym and a burner email address. She didn't ask for credit. Just space. Just freedom. Her words began to reshape the industry from within. Quietly, the books she touched found homes on bestseller lists. Critics noted their emotional depth, the way the characters breathed on the page. Lauren never said a word. She didn't need to. Her pen did the speaking. She built a life out of margins. Evenings were for tea and edits. Mornings were for long walks by the water. She avoided mirrors, not out of shame, but because they asked questions she wasn't ready to answer. She stopped celebrating birthdays. Instead, she marked time by the number of books she ghost wrote: 6 in year 1, 9 in year 2, 12 in year 3. It was in the 4th year, at a literary conference in Chicago, that everything shifted. She attended as a guest. Not a panelist, not a name, just a silent observer in a sea of chatter. The panels were what you'd expect: editors discussing trends, writers bemoaning deadlines, agents scouting talent. And then came Andrew M. Ellis, newly appointed CEO of a rising mid-size publishing house that was disrupting the traditional model. He didn't dress like a CEO. No tie, rolled sleeves. He opened his keynote with a line from Clarice Lispector and spoke of literature as a form of spiritual infrastructure. "We don't need louder voices," he said, "we need honest ones." Lauren sat in the 3rd row, frozen. Afterward, she lingered by the coffee table. Not to network, just to exist. She was reading a program pamphlet when she heard his voice. "You looked like you were really listening." She looked up. Andrew, smiling, curious, not flirtatious, just present. "I was," she said. "Most people speak of writing like commerce. You spoke of it like air." He tilted his head. "That's either a compliment or an accusation. Maybe both." He laughed. "What do you write?" "I help others shape their stories." "Ghostwriter?" She nodded. "But I prefer the term, story architect." He raised an eyebrow. "I like that." They spoke for 10 minutes. Then 20. Then exchanged email addresses. She gave him one link to her pen name. The identity she'd stitched together like armor. Their correspondence began that night. He sent articles. She sent thoughts. He asked questions. She answered with paragraphs. Lauren didn't tell him her real name. Not because she didn't trust him, but because she didn't trust the world that had once weaponized her name. They wrote to each other for 6 weeks before their first phone call. His voice, warm and steady, felt like reading a book you once loved and thought you'd outgrown. He asked to meet. She declined, then rescheduled, then declined again. Finally, she agreed. A small cafe, neutral territory. When she arrived, he was already seated, a book beside his coffee. He stood, smiled, and said, "I knew it was you. I just didn't know how long it would take you to tell me." Lauren froze. "You knew, I guessed," he said. "Your writing has a fingerprint. Once you've read it, it never really leaves you." She sat down. He didn't ask why she'd hidden. He only asked if she was done hiding. She didn't answer, but she didn't run. And that, for now, was enough. He didn't fall in love with my face. He fell in love with my voice. There's a kind of intimacy that doesn't need a room. No shared coffee mugs or fingers brushing across backs in the dark. No exchanged glances or warm bodies pressed close. Just the kind of conversation that lingers. That carves small openings in the silence. That dares you to show up with more than your curated self. That was what Lauren and Andrew built. After their first meeting at the cafe, the world didn't change, but something inside her did. For the first time in years, she felt seen not for what she had lost, but for what she carried. Her words, her thoughts, her ability to build emotional architecture from inside pain. He never asked her to define herself. He asked what kept her awake at night, what she feared, what she believed in, what she had stopped believing in. They didn't fall in love quickly. They didn't post selfies or announce anything. In fact, there were weeks they didn't speak, only shared annotated PDFs of stories she was shaping and acquisitions he was considering. It was quiet, unmarketed, a relationship made not for the world but for two people who'd been chewed through by it. Andrew became her tether. He didn't rescue her, he respected her. He made space for her ghosts without asking for details. He never once brought up her past unless she did. When she spoke about her sister, obliquely, never by name, he didn't flinch. He said things like, "Sometimes survival looks like distance," and "Some families wound us in ways strangers never could." Lauren let him read drafts no one else saw, not even her clients. He gave thoughtful feedback, not line edits. Sometimes he'd highlight a sentence and write, "This hurts," in the best way. Other times, he'd leave a single note, "Say more." By the end of that first year, they had created something neither had expected: trust. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense. There were no grand gestures, no rooftop dinners, but when Andrew's publishing house expanded, he invited Lauren to consult on a new imprint. She refused twice, unsure of returning to any public-facing role. He didn't push. Instead, he mailed her a first edition of one of her favorite books with a note tucked inside. "You don't have to be visible to be powerful." She accepted. They worked together, parallel, separate, intertwined. Lauren began to split her time between cities, her quiet coastal refuge and New York, where Andrew's company was based. She always stayed in the same brownstone guest suite. He always stocked the kitchen with the teas she liked. One evening, after a brutal round of edits for a debut novelist, they sat on the floor of his office, surrounded by printouts. Andrew handed her a glass of wine. She took a long sip and said, "I never thought I'd feel safe in a building filled with people again." He replied, "Maybe it's not the building. Maybe it's who built it." That night, when she fell asleep on his couch with a manuscript across her lap, he covered her with a blanket and didn't try to wake her. They never talked about dating. They talked about growth, about recovery, about structure, and somewhere between line breaks and long pauses, they fell in love without realizing it. When he kissed her for the first time, it wasn't dramatic. It was late. They had just closed a deal. Lauren was tired and slightly euphoric. She smiled at him in that way she rarely did, and he stepped forward. quietly, reverently, and kissed her like a question. She answered by not moving away. The months that followed were not cinematic. They were real. She still had nightmares. He still worked too much. They still didn't have couple photos. But she kept a toothbrush in his bathroom. And he memorized her preferred editing symbols. Lauren didn't post about him. Didn't tell her family. Didn't even say his full name when people asked. He was hers, not as possession, but as sanctuary. So when Andrew moved his company headquarters to New York, she didn't protest. She helped him pick paint colors for the new office. She designed the reading room herself. Deep blues, low light, velvet chairs. What she didn't know was that the acquisition Andrew had finalized 6 weeks earlier was about to make everything collide. Because one of the last files she saw on his desk, one she didn't open, bore the name of the very company her sister now worked for. And Lauren, for all her words, wasn't prepared for the chapter that was about to begin. I walked into the boardroom with no nameplate. He walked in and said mine out loud. The invitation had arrived in the form of a printed letter, elegant and vague. It was addressed to Lauren's pseudonym, the one she used for every ghostwriting contract. The one that had earned her respect behind closed doors and anonymity in every public space. The publishing house, one she vaguely recognized but hadn't connected the dots on, had recently been acquired by a larger firm. The event was billed as a joint strategy session. Authors, editors, and executives all gathered to align vision and voice. Lauren almost didn't go. She didn't like rooms filled with expectation. Boardrooms were battlegrounds dressed as neutral spaces. But Andrew had nudged her gently. "You don't have to speak," he'd said, sipping tea beside her on a rainy morning. "Just listen, just be." So she went. She wore navy, neutral, her hair pulled back, no makeup beyond what was necessary to deflect attention. Her badge bore her pseudonym. No one questioned it. She was just another author in a room of titles and agendas. The building was glass and steel, too modern for the ghosts it was about to inherit. The boardroom was rectangular, polished, unnaturally bright. A long mahogany table cut the space like a scar. Water bottles lined the center. Folders pre-stamped with the new company's logo sat at every seat. She took a seat near the end, unassuming, watching, and then the doors opened. Marissa walked in as if the space belonged to her. High heels, sharp suit, hair like flame. She carried herself like someone still auditioning, even when she had the job. As senior editorial director, she moved through the room with nods and forced warmth. When she saw Lauren, she didn't stop walking, didn't recognize her. Of course she didn't. Lauren's real name wasn't on the tag. Her voice wasn't in the room, just her presence. And it was quiet, deliberate, measured. Marissa took her place 2 seats from the head of the table. She smiled at one of the male editors. "I hear the new CEO is discerning. He'll appreciate strong ideas, and strong women." She said it loud enough to be overheard. She always did. Lauren looked down at her folder. 10 minutes passed. The room settled. Then Andrew walked in. No tie, just confidence. He moved like someone used to pacing stages but respectful of silence. He didn't carry notes. He didn't need to. Lauren felt it before she saw it, the stillness in her chest. The way everything in her body quieted when he entered a room. He scanned the table once, twice, then his eyes landed on her. He smiled, genuinely, without hesitation. "You didn't tell me you'd be here," he said. The words weren't loud, but they cut through every other sound. Every head turned. Lauren felt her throat close. She tried to speak, failed, nodded once. Andrew crossed the room, not quickly, but directly. He stopped beside her chair, leaned down, and kissed her cheek. Not performative, not hesitant, not theatrical, just anchored. Then he turned to the room. "This is the woman whose voice helped shape the soul of this company," he said. No one spoke, not even Marissa. Lauren didn't look at her sister, but she didn't need to. She felt the silence shift, felt the way it folded in on itself, felt Marissa's weight buckle under the revelation. It wasn't just the kiss, or the name. It was the recognition, the acknowledgement, the undeniable presence of someone who had built from the shadows, and was now fully seen. Andrew moved to the head of the table. The meeting began. Objectives were outlined, strategies debated. Lauren remained quiet for most of it. But when she spoke, briefly, on the intersection between emotional truth and editorial responsibility, everyone listened. Even Marissa. And that, perhaps, was the real shift. Because Lauren didn't need to be louder than her sister. She had become undeniable without ever raising her voice. When the meeting ended, Andrew walked her to the elevator. "She didn't recognize you," he said. Lauren exhaled. "She never really saw me. Even when she looked." He squeezed her hand. Marissa exited minutes later, shoulders tight, eyes forward. She brushed past them, and for the first time in her life, Lauren didn't feel small next to her sister. She felt whole, not because someone had chosen her, but because she had stopped needing anyone's permission to be present. "She used lies to destroy me. I used truth to disappear from her reach." Lauren didn't expect Marissa to show up afterward. She thought the silence of the elevator doors and the hallway outside the boardroom would be the last echoes of that moment, the end of a performance she never meant to stage. But the knock on the side door of the courtyard came 20 minutes later. Sharp and controlled, Marissa stood there with her arms folded, mouth tight. She wasn't rattled in the way most people are when the curtain falls. She was trying to compose herself, trying to stay in control of a narrative she no longer owned. "Can we talk?" she asked. Lauren nodded. She didn't want to, but some part of her, the part that had once believed in reconciliation, let her feet move. They sat on a bench beneath an old elm tree behind the building. A quiet place, the kind of place no one raised their voice. Marissa stared ahead for a long time before saying, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Lauren let the silence breathe, then answered softly, "Because you never listened." It landed like a whisper with the weight of a scream. Marissa blinked. Her jaw tightened. "I was scared," she said, almost too fast. "Back then, with Isaac, I thought you were going to get everything. The career, the family's attention, even him, and I." Lauren didn't interrupt. She didn't flinch. She waited. Marissa finally turned to her. "He never cheated. You know, I lied. I made it up. I thought if I could just twist things a little, you'd back away. And when you did, it felt like I'd won." Lauren looked at her sister. Not with anger, not even disappointment, just clarity. "You didn't win," she said. "You just made sure I lost." But even that didn't last. Marissa's mouth opened and closed. She looked suddenly older, as if holding the truth inside had aged her more than time ever could. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Lauren gave her a half smile. Kind, detached. "I don't need him back," she said. "I never did. I needed to be myself without needing to justify who that is." "I thought you'd destroy me today," Marissa murmured. "The way I destroyed you." Lauren shook her head slowly. "I'm not interested in revenge. That was never the story I wanted to tell." Marissa swallowed hard. "And Andrew?" Lauren paused. "He saw me before he knew who I was," she said, "and he didn't flinch when he found out. That's what love looks like when it's not chasing a spotlight." They sat there a while longer, the wind rustling the elm leaves like an old memory returning. Eventually, Marissa stood. "Take care of yourself," she said. Lauren simply nodded. She watched her sister walk away, not out of her life, but out of the version of herself Lauren used to chase. That evening, back at Andrew's apartment, Lauren sat at the kitchen table with a manuscript in front of her. A proof copy, her name, not the pseudonym, graced the cover in soft gold foil. Her hands trembled only slightly as she picked up the pen. She signed it, the first of many. Andrew appeared behind her, rested his hand gently on her shoulder. She looked up at him, and something eased, not because she needed him to complete her, but because she was finally complete on her own. "She used deception to steal what I loved," Lauren thought, "but love that's real finds its way back, even in silence."